Okay, to refresh our recollection, last time I was talking about the elements of a crime, which is the actus reus, that is, you did something, the mens rea, you intended to do something, or you did it with a certain mindset, and then sometimes causation and sometimes special circumstances. But really, we're going to go for actus reus and mens rea as the two main parts of a crime, okay? So let me break down a little bit the actus reus, the wrongful act. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of a criminal law. Now, there's this thing called the Model Penal Code, or the MPC, that a lot of states use to model their state laws on. So this is the Model Penal Code version of this law. Okay. So the law is larceny, or the crime is larceny. And it's defined as the unlawful taking and carrying away of another person's property with the intent to deprive them of that property. So, with that definition in mind, what is the wrongful act? It is the taking and carrying away of another person's property. What is the wrongful mindset? What is the wrongful intent? It's with the intent to deprive them of that property, right? So if I accidentally pick up something that I thought was mine and walk away, that's not larceny because I have to do the wrongful act, which is picking up and carrying it away, and I have to intend to deprive them of that property, right? Let me give you another example. So the Model Penal Code version of assault is the harmful touching of another person with the intent to cause bodily harm. Okay. So let's say I am sleepwalking, and in my sleepwalking, I'm thinking I'm fighting a giant spider, and I'm swinging my arms wildly, right? And I slap you in the face. I have the actus reus. I have the wrongful act. I harmfully touched another person. But because I was sleepwalking, I did not intend to cause bodily harm. So therefore, I did not commit a crime because I was sleepwalking. Didn't have the mental capacity to form intent. Okay? So let me ask you this. Do you think it's possible for an involuntary act to ever be considered a crime? My sleepwalking example, right? Can you think of any reason why we would want to hold someone criminally accountable for an action that they did not intend to commit in that moment? And hopefully, the in that moment helps cue you into where I'm going, right? Because sometimes a voluntary act that is then followed by a non-voluntary act can be criminal, all right? So let me give you an example. Let's say you go to a party and they have a bunch of, beer and liquor and wine, and you're drinking all of it, all right? And then you get into your car and you drive home, you're completely smashed, right? While driving, you pass out the wheel and you swerve into opposing traffic and you kill an entire family, right? Can you say, hey, not a crime because I was passed out? I couldn't possibly have had the requisite mental capacity, the mens rea, the wrongful mind to have committed this crime. Will a court go for that? No, they won't, right? They will read into the whole circumstance and say, okay, at some point you did have the mental capacity to decide to drink that wine and drink that beer and drink those shots, right? And at that point is when we're saying you should have known that you had your keys in your pocket, you didn't have a designated driver, you had to get home at some point, you knew that you were likely to drive home drunk, right? And so we're going to take that mens rea from earlier and put it onto the wrongful act later, right? Um, there's a couple of examples of this in from actual cases. One is a very old one. This is from a case called Martin v. Alabama, and it was a public drunkenness case. And I want you to guess which way the court went. So I'll give you the fact pattern. So officers went to this guy Martin's house, and he was drunk in his house, right? and they were arresting him for something else. They took him down to the station, and one of the charges they put against him was public drunkenness. And he said, wait a minute, I wasn't publicly drunk when you came to my house, right? And so it wasn't a voluntary thing. I didn't have the mens rea to be publicly drunk. Yes, I knew I was drinking, but I didn't know I was going to go outside. I had no intention of going outside when I started drinking. I was in my house. What did the court say? Was he guilty of public drunkenness or not? I'm giving it away. Um, the court said no, he wasn't guilty, right? Because it was involuntary that he was transported away from his house, right? He could maybe foresee that he would be drunk in his house, but he couldn't foresee that random police officers would show up and carry him away into the public, right? Let me give you one more example. This is from a case called People versus Decina, and it's very similar to the drinking and driving hypothetical I just gave you. So Decina, he was driving while he was completely sober, completely fine, very healthy, driving, but then he started having a seizure while he was driving. He swerved into opposing traffic, and he ended up killing four people. Now, here's one more piece of information for you. He had had seizures before, and they came kind of sporadically throughout his life. He never knew when one would hit. But a few times a year he would have seizures. Okay. The police charged him with operating a vehicle in a negligent, reckless manner that caused the death of these four people. Do you think? And he said, "Well, wait a minute. I didn't know I was going to have a seizure. That might have been a wrongful act of me swerving, but I was having a seizure, so I couldn't possibly have planned for that." What did the court say? They said, "Yes, wrongful act, but but also yes to mens rea." They said that was foreseeable because you'd had them in the past and you knew that they could happen at any time. And so therefore you should never have gotten behind a wheel knowing that you could at any moment have a seizure, right? And so they said he was guilty in that case of the crime of killing these four people. Okay. Got 2.5 minutes left. Do you think that planning a crime can be a wrongful act? So let me give you an example. Let's say you are working as a house cleaner for an elderly lady who's very rich, and you want to kill her and steal all her jewels. And you've been fantasizing about this for years. You write it in your journal about how much you hate her and how easy it would be to take all her jewels. And um, she doesn't have any family, so they would just go to the state. So you deserve it because you've been taking care of her for so long. And then one day you're like, you know what? Tomorrow is the day I'm going to do this. Tomorrow I'm going to kill her by turning on the gas in her stove while before I leave, and she'll just suffocate from gas inhalation overnight, right? And before you leave, you say goodnight, Mrs. So and so, and the journal falls out of your pocket and lands in her bed. And you leave, you don't notice it's there. And she opens up the journal and reads how much you hate her and how you plan to kill her tomorrow night, right? With this gas. And so she calls the police, and they look at it, and they arrest you, and they charge you with attempted murder. Do these charges stick? What do you think? And the answer is no. You might have had the mens rea, right? And there's plenty of evidence that you intended to kill her tomorrow night, right? You had it all planned out. But we don't do thought crimes. We're not the thought police. You have to have done some overt actus reus for it to be a crime, right? So you have to have bought a tool to turn the gas on, or maybe you just did research about how long gas needs to flow into a room before someone dies, right? That Googling could be an overt act, but there has to be some act. You can't just be convicted of a crime just for having the mens rea. Make sense? All right. We'll switch over and talk about mens rea in our next lecture. Cool? All right.